I'm not sure if I can handle it. Get it? Handle it. Okay, so here's where we are. Last video, we turned this tankard from a offcut of a beam, a 6x8 beam. This video, we're going to try to put a handle on it, and this is the handle design that I've come up with. So we'll get to work, and then we'll talk about it a little bit later. Let's get to it.
So my first step was to just take a blank, and then I drew the shape of the handle on it, took it to a bandsaw, and just started rough cutting that out. Those of you who are paying attention will notice that this is not my typical shop. I actually drive race cars on the weekend, and this little bandsaw was out at our race shop, so I took it out there with me, did a little bit of woodworking before we started in on the race car for the day. And then once I had the rough shape cut out, this blank was pretty thick, so I went ahead and cut it in half. And my thinking was then I would have a backup piece in case I screwed something up. From that point, it was just take it back to the shop and start working with it with files and rasps to try to get the shape that I wanted. I had a really tough time trying to figure out how to hold it so that I could start working on it with files. I also build guitars in my spare time, and I'll put a link down below to my YouTube channel for the race team and my Facebook page for the guitar building. So this is very similar to shaping a guitar neck, right? And I'm not the greatest wood carver, but I knew kind of how to go about doing this. Just take some files and start getting it into a shape. And like I said, it was really tough to figure out how to hold the thing down, so I settled on this clamp, just clamp it to my workbench and start working on it with the files. I tried to hold it in my hand, but if any of you have ever taken off the hide on your knuckle on one of these rasps, you'll know that's not the best method. So it took me a little while to come to this, and it was tough to get video footage of this just because the clamp was in the way and then I'm in the way. So this is kind of what I settled on, and then just started working on it. And this part I'm going at it with a round file to try to get in some of the tighter curves. I have a half round rasp that I like to use. That's the bigger one that you saw me using earlier. It works really well. That would be the half round right there. It works really well for some of these larger curves, but the tighter ones I had that little round file to try to get in. So I just kept working on it. And then this happened. So I tried not to panic at this point and tell myself, well, you know, it's not necessarily a bad thing because it does allow me to get in here a little bit better. So, you know, don't panic. Keep going and just work on it like it is, and then when we get done with the two pieces, glue them back together and see if it's going to work out all right. So my first step here was to just get the outline of the thing shaped into what I was looking for. You know, I rough cut it on the bandsaw just outside my lines that I had sketched for the shape, and then come back at it with the files to try to bring it up to the lines. In hindsight, a spindle sander would have been a whole lot better, but I don't actually have one. I have access to one, but it's at a friend's shop about an hour and a half away. So I just kind of took the files to it and tried to bring it up to my outline that I had drawn on it. And then after that, I would start focusing on actually shaping it into something that wasn't square, that you could actually put in your hand and be comfortable holding. I got a little bit worried at this point because it was hanging out so far from the clamp, so I had to start working really light, and then I kind of panicked and moved it back in. I didn't want the other end of it to break off like the other tip part did. And then I took the tip over to my little workbench and tried to clamp it in my little bench vise and start trying to shape it. It was really difficult because it's so small, but I just couldn't figure out how to hold the thing. So just clamping it in this little workbench vise and just start filing on it to try to get it the shape that I wanted. And of course, sometimes that means getting down on the floor and trying to get it at eye level so that you can see what you're doing. And then once I had the rough shape done and the outline brought up to my line that I had sketched on it, I started rounding the edges over to try to make it less blocky and kind of round. And again, this is where I really like this half round file. I use it a lot on Guitarwerx as well, just to file shapes into the bodies, carve the neck and stuff. And I really like it for this kind of work. It works really well for rounding these edges over. It's also pretty aggressive, so you have to be careful just how far you go with it. You can take off way too much real quick. And then of course I had to come back at it with the little round file to get in some of those tighter curves to round that edge over as well. It got a little bit frustrating at times because, like I said, I couldn't figure out how to hold the thing, so trying to clamp it where I could get the file in there and the file didn't run into my workbench. I think I might have filed a little bit on my workbench as well, but that's okay. This was a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be. Like I said, I'm not a wood carver, and man, mad props to those of you who are. It is not an easy skill, and I know you guys that are wood carvers are going to say, well, yeah, we could have told you that. But yeah, really just mad respect to those of you who do wood carving as your medium. This is not as easy as I thought it was going to be. I struggled with it quite a bit, but you know, it's definitely a skill that takes some time to master, and I'm far from that. So once I had a shape that I was actually happy enough with, I took it over to the lathe, and I chucked up my Jacobs chuck in the drive center and stuck a sanding pad in it, and just kind of used that as a sanding mandrel. I don't really have a belt sander or a disc sander of any sort, so this was my pseudo disc sander, and it worked pretty good. And I just started working, you know, I started out at 60 grit just to take off a lot of the rasp marks and file marks, and then just started working up through the grits from there, and it worked okay. I need a better system, and it was tough to get in some of the parts, you know, the insides of the tighter circles. It was difficult to get in there. I don't like hand sanding, so I was trying to find anything that I could do to bypass any sort of hand sanding, but this worked okay. And this is just me going up through all the grits. I think I took the handle up to 240 grit, which seemed good enough. I didn't want it super smooth. I wanted it to kind of have some character to it, so I figured 240 was good enough. Plus, I was getting pretty frustrated with this not the greatest setup, but you know, like I said, it worked out. And then from there, I saw this trick online. Just tape some sandpaper to the actual piece, and then sand the handle against that, and it'll kind of take that shape. And it worked pretty good. I still had to take it over and clamp it in my bench vise and do a little bit of filing to get the round shape into it so that it would sit flush against the mud part. But it worked out. This is a pretty good method. And then from there, it was just use some tight bond, and I put the rubber bands around it ahead of time so that I was going to use the rubber bands as the clamp. So spread some glue on it, stick it on the mug, pull the rubber bands up over it to hold it in place. And then from there I decided, you know what, a little bit of tape can't hurt, so let's run some tape around it to act as a clamp as well. And then I left that overnight to dry. And of course, deal with the little tip of the tail, glue that back on after I had finished shaping it. And I added some super glue to this later. I'm really worried about it staying on there, but I think it's good.
Okay, well, there we are. The Glu-Lam Tankard. I'm pretty happy with the way this came out. My first handle carving exercise, so I'm pretty happy with that. I wanted it to look like a dragon's tail, so I kind of gave it, that shape there on the tip of the tail, and then I tried to give it a little spike on the back of there, give a little bit of definition to that. And I really like the way the wood grain came out on the tip of the tail there. It almost looks like a snake's head. It's kind of cool. I had originally planned on trying to carve in like scales on it, but like I said in the video, I'm not the greatest wood carver. Mad props to those of you who are. And at some point, I just kind of said, you know what, this is good enough. For my first wood carving exercise, it's good enough. So I'm really pleased with it. I think it came out really cool, and I think it's going to make a great gift. So thank you guys for watching the video, and if you like this, make sure you click that subscribe button and give it a thumbs up, and we'll see you in the next video.